Obviously quite through somebody asked me the other day, when you do a video about your top 5 most memorable Wednesday games, and I could probably do a top 50. But I'm going to do some memorable ones. And when I sat down, what's the ones that really stick in my head? The interesting thing about it was they weren't all wins. In fact, a lot of them weren't wins. Obviously, the Peterborough game, the miracle of Hillsborough, probably the greatest comeback in, genuinely, I think, the history of British football. I can't think of another comeback on that scale. So that's definitely up there, and obviously maybe a little bit of recency bias in there as well, but I don't think that'll ever be forgotten. And not just the comeback, but the drama of it, the last minute goals, the penalties, everything about it. Even them scoring via that deflection added another layer into it. And what I think often gets overlooked, rightly it's remembered as Liam Palmer, the club man, the Wednesday fan, scoring that last minute goal, but the calmness of Patterson's finish at the end, I think that often gets overlooked. That is a wonderful finish. But other games also stick in my head. There was a game against QPR when I was a kid that we won by 7 goals. And that stuck in my head because Mark Chamberlain scored a wonderful goal. Now, Mark Chamberlain was one of my favourite players when I was a kid, but he hardly ever seemed to start a game. And that's maybe the mist of time playing tricks on me. But I've got it in my head that he made more sub-appearances for Wednesday than he started. In fact, I've got it in my head that he's made more sub-appearances than anybody in history of football. And I really love Mark Chamberlain. And genuinely, I thought he could have got 20 or 30 England caps. I really do. I think he was that good. And I think he was probably a little bit unfortunate that Howard Wilkinson had got a certain style of football, which I enjoyed. As a young man, I really enjoyed watching Howard's team. It was quick, it was direct, it was thrusting, crosses into the box, goalmouth excitement, a lot of goalmouth excitement. And I know the press weren't very kind, and direct teams like ourselves and Graham Taylor's Watford, or Bassett at Wimbledon or whatever, and a bit of snobbery in football. But essentially the main reason they didn't like us is because we beat their favourites, the press, the darlings like Liverpool. We'd go toe to toe with them, and win. That's why the press didn't really like us. But it was a very direct style. I'm not sure it really suited Mark Chamberlain, but I thought he was a wonderful player. And I think we'd sold him to Portsmouth before Ron came, and I always couldn't help but wonder, what would he have been like under Ron Atkinson? Different style of play, still very attacking and quick and slick, but different style. I think it would have suited Mark Chamberlain. So I always remember that 7-1 game because he scored in that a lovely goal. I know it's a random game, but there we go. Memorable ones in my own head. And you do remember games for different reasons. Another game that I'll never forget was against Derby. Wednesday, last minute. And anywhere else you'd think, well, that's that. And then it was like one of the most typical Wednesday things ever, that within the space of 50 seconds, we managed to completely capitulate and throw 3 points away. And it's like the most Wednesday thing ever, that result. If you had to sum up Wednesday by a scoreline and the timeline of that game, I think that one probably sums it up. That's always stuck in my head. And another one that remains with me even today was a game at home against Plymouth Argyle. We lost, I think it was 3-0 in the end. Paul Sturrock's Plymouth Argyle. And I can't remember if it was a second or third goal. It was a really quality goal. And I actually applauded. I sat in a cop with my mates. I applauded, they applauded. because it was a really quality piece of football. And I'm going to be honest, that season, that was about the only good football I'd seen. Now, it was against us in our own backyard, but it was good football. There was some bloke behind us, you wankers, fucking applauding opposition. I said, it was a good goal, And that's what stuck in my mind, not for the fact that we'd been completely dominated by a team that I'd never, contemplated ever beating us in my life. It was the nature of it. They played us off par. And I can remember looking at that pitch, and the game's always stick in my mind because of the recency from us being in the Premier League and just thinking how far we'd fallen in such a short space of time. I'm sat there thinking, because I can talk back the early 90s now, and that's the equivalent of, my dad telling me about the 60s when I was a kid. It's a different world, it's a different lifetime. But that Plymouth game, I'm sat there thinking, it's only 4-5 years ago. I'm watching Paolo Di Canio, Benito Carbone, and now I'm watching my team at home getting absolutely mullered by some non-league players, and they're playing us off par, and fully deserved to. And I think that's why that game's always stuck in my head. Because I can remember looking around that stadium and sort of getting them dreamy images and thinking, I seen Di Canio put a defender on his arse 3 times in that exact spot where our right back's just been rinsed. Not even double digits ago. So that's a game that's always stuck in my head, that Plymouth game. Kaiserslautern will always stick in my head. That is I know Peterborough will live long in the memory, but that Kaiserslautern game, the atmosphere that day was electric from the very first second I walked into Turnstile, because everybody had been building up to it. It had been cranking up in the week. Wednesday had been robbed in the first leg. They'd got David Hurst sent off. They got a penalty that A, wasn't a foul, and B, the challenge was about 3 yards outside box. They'd robbed us blind with that and cheating. And that atmosphere was hostile. That's the most hostile I've ever known Hillsborough. And it was from the first minute. And it was all sides of the ground. It weren't just like the Cop or one end at North. It was the entire ground was hostile. There was a bloke behind us who'd been learning German phrases in the week. That is the most hostile I've ever seen it. And I thought the place was going to go up because I was on the front of the North that night. And one of their players took a dive right in front of us, went down holding ankle. I can't remember if it might have been Danny Wilson. Somebody were getting a talking to a booking off referee. And as he's down holding ankle, this player, he looked right up at us in the stand and he went, oh, and people were trying to get over wall to him. It was unbelievable atmosphere. Shed scored a brilliant free kick, but the art did us in. But it was wonderful. Fantastic partisan atmosphere. And I can remember sitting there and think, well, we're out this year, but I can get used to this. I could get used to this European football and taking on these different cheats from all over Europe, because that's how you look at it when you're young. With the diving ways, because it was still frowned upon a bit over there back then. And that remains the last time I ever saw any European football at Hillsborough. And I've got to say, I don't think I'll ever see it again. Not in my lifetime. I think one of the other most memorable games has to be the Wembley semi-final. Because daft as it sounds, I was nervous going into that game, which sounds daft, but Bassett United had got a bit of a hoodoo on us. And in 92, we lost out on the title, the top division title, which sounds amazing now. When you look at the dominance of teams like City and Liverpool and whatever, but we lost out by 7 points and we dropped 6 points to United. And they had got the sign on us. On paper, far better team, you know. They'd got an odds and sods side that Bassett had put together. So when we played them in semi-final, there was part of me that was nervous. But then down at Wembley, we completely dominated them. Obviously, that early goal by Chris Waddle, and after that, it was a scintillating Wednesday performance. Warhurst, what unbelievable! Waddle again, and I've got to say, their goalkeeper on that day, Alan Kelly, I think that's up there in probably the top 10 goalkeeping performances I've ever seen. He was absolutely outstanding. Save after save after save. He was absolutely unbelievable that day. And they always do seem to tip up good goalkeepers down there. Unbelievable. That, I mean, the chant was, it should have been 10, and it really should if it hadn't been for him. Absolutely outstanding display from Wednesday and an outstanding display from their goalkeeper, so that game lives long. I think the most I've ever celebrated at a game, it's hard to say, innit? Last minute winners are always, different, always special. You really can't help yourself. But a game that always stuck in my mind was a game against Blackburn in our promotion season, 1990. We went to Goldenhound early doors, and then there was a lull. It's an evening match. There was a lull. Crowd were quiet, so it's not something new. And then John Sheridan scored, and I think that's certainly at that time the most crazy I've ever been at a game, because John Sheridan was my hero, and the crowd had been giving him some stick. He'd had a poor game against Oxford. I remember him missing a penalty. And I can remember that Oxford game, boos ringing out. And I was looking across Cop. And I said to my dad, what are they booing? He said, they're booing John Sheridan, son. I went, why? I mean, he weren't playing well, but I could not comprehend it, because I've never been a booer. I've never been somebody to slag players off on the ground or shout abuse at our players. Referee, fair game. Opposition, fair game. Linesman, fair game. Never shouted abuse at any of our players, I might walk through Park after the game saying, God, he was shit or whatever, but not in stadium. So they'd been giving him some hammer, which I was incredulous about. And then this Blackburn game, he picked ball up just outside box, smashed it in. It's a funny strike, because even now the ball takes a really funny sort of trajectory. It's an up and down shot, but it doesn't go very high. It's really weird. Don't really lace it as such. Every time I see it, the shot still surprises me. It's low, but it goes up and down. It's really strange. And that hit the back of the net. And I felt it so much, because I loved John Sheridan. And I thought, have that, you bastards. And he ran towards Cobb, and I think he was saying, have that, you bastards, as well. And all other players mobbed him, and they were all pointing at him and pointing into the crowd. And I think that's the most I've ever celebrated a goal. I was absolutely buzzing. Buzzing that we'd scored, but more for John Sheridan, because I couldn't believe he'd been booed. Even now, what 30 odd years later, I still couldn't believe it. And what I remember is coming out of the ground, them big gates were open. There was a couple of blokes in front of us, and one of them, I knew that I'd get him playing better. A game that sticks in my mind, even though I can't remember the score, was a game at Old Trafford. And I was a bit pissed. I'd gone with my mate Jim. We're right at front. And Man United had got a corner. And there was a bit of a delay. I can't remember what delay we for. There was a bit of a delay. And Eric Cantona got his hand holding near post. And Cantona, you wanker. Obviously, he just ignored it. So I went again. Yeah, French twat. Nah, Cantona, you horrible, smelly French cunt. And he let go of post and he turned and he looked at me. And then he turned square on. It was only about a yard and a half away. And I did Homer Simpson thing into edge. You know, he'd got a look in his eye. And it weren't long after that when I was watching Match at Day and he's gone in and done that Palace fan. And my mate Jim at the time, we've seen what he's done. I went, yeah. He says, do you remember that game? I went, yeah. I think he'd possibly been walking a bit of an edge for some time. I think he'd had enough of it. But that sticks in my mind. Not proud of it, but you can't rewrite history, can you? You know, I can't sit here and pretend I'm Mr. Innocent and this and other, because I think we've all been 17 and can't handle his ale and says stupid stuff that we shouldn't do. But that's always stuck in my mind because he was looking right in my eyes, and like I said, he's only a yard and a half away, and I just because everyone's lippy till they get fronted up, aren't they? That's a game that always stuck in my mind, although I can't remember the score from that. Cannot remember the score. Bizarre. And then a game that sticks in my mind, not just for the score but for the football, was a game again against Blackburn. That was that League Cup semi-final away game. It was a great football performance all the way, but there was a 20-minute spell in that one Wednesday just looked so devastating and dangerous. It was unbelievable. Quick, direct, with pace, and flair and creativity, and they couldn't live with us. They could not live with us. We were absolutely, like I said, for a 20-25 minute, that was stunning football. I don't think I've ever seen better from a Wednesday team. That was unbelievable. Outstanding. And you think it's going to last forever, don't you? And then, within, 10 years, Leyton Orient, Dagenham and Redbridge, You always think it's going to last forever. But the good news is the bad times are the same. You think they're going to last forever, but Wednesday will be up there again at some stage. I'd like to hope it'll be in my lifetime. But you never know. But we will get there again, hopefully.